Alright. Hello, folks. Welcome back to Weekend Weapon of Choice GvG edition. Today, episode 3. Today's episode will be about returning to the game, returning to GvG. Special guests today are Eldrith, I hope I'm not butchering his name, and Kissaki from Team. I'm not giving their full name because Team, as I have researched, had like 4 or 5 guilds. Um, Currently they are now and always Team, but considering the fact that they have been playing from I think 2008 and returned now as I would say mostly a silver trim contender means they have a lot of experience, especially back in the day, and looking at how they see the game now compared to back then is probably something that could technically help people who are thinking to return, who might be at the edge of returning, but saying, like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to. And I think to some degree it may or may not help PvE players thinking about joining PvP. Because if we look at the metagame back in 2008, for example, even if we look at the later years like 2009, 10, even 11, it is a complete difference to now. Like the metagame shifted so far, even into, whew, I think 2015, 16, maybe even 17 when I played with Skrill, we still had runners, and now it's entirely gone. So the difference is massive, and I'm curious to see and hear about their take on the metagame now compared to back then. If they had to adapt to something specific, if they are somehow or some way used to it in a different form or way. But yeah, this is today's podcast about. Another side note, I've got a lot of mentionings about, well, you've taken on so many Europeans on the podcast. I know the first 2 episodes were basically about winners from the last MATs, which was Fizz and XXX. Today it's about returning guilds. Next week, I can't promise because it's not entirely up to me, but next week will feature Americans. Not only because I want Americans on the show as well, but because my schedule says I can't be on early. So next week is another late show, probably 3 to 4 hours later than today, which will be better for Americans. I'm sorry for all the Europeans out there. Um, but it will hopefully feature Americans, their take on the game, because they are nowadays the minority. I mean, back in the day, to some degree, they were as well. Looking at or at what time we look at, they definitely were. Um, Even though American won in the first part of the game after the Asians, probably the most gold capes, but that's a different story. Um, Another thing I wanted to mention, because I said it last week, when talking to Fade and Luth about changes in Guild Wars. I said ultimately PvP choices are up to Izzy, Azire, or whatever you want to call it, the good boy. Um, this is not entirely true. So, um, how it works is basically 2 weeks has the project of Guild Wars Reforged. They are ultimately the people who decide what is going into the game or what not. Unless it's like a major change, for example, making prophecies free to play or something, they would have to go with this through ArenaNet because it's a major change. But putting shit into the game like dungeons, skill updates, etc., is ultimately their decision. And the fact that Easy did it was more of a favor than anything else. Like, Izzy gave his notes on how he would like to see the game and things he didn't do back in the day, gave it to them, and they worked off it. But it was ultimately their decision to do it. So if you think about it, it is partially Izzy's fault that we got Spirit Way, but they let it through. It is ultimately their decision to do it. They could have said to no to whatever Izzy wrote down, but they didn't. So I hope I cleared this up. Izzy is not in the project. Izzy is just doing voluntary work for them and nothing else. All right. Since I cleaned this up, let me check on Discord really quick, and then we get going. All right. All right. Let me see. Daniel, or am I supposed to say Eldred and Kissaki, are you here?
Hello, hello.
Yes. Hello.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thanks for
As
having us.
mentioned, yes. What?
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. As in all my previous shows, we go through you guys first. What is your GvG histories? What are your, or what people recognize about you, like your most used in-game name and roles and shit. I would suppose we start with Eldritch, and then we go with Kisaki. So, what is your most used in-game name? What name do people recognize? And when did you start GvG? When did you get into top GvG?
I basically only have one name, that's War Angel Eldrith. That's my monk. And I started playing about in 2008 with Strikers 1 team and have been with team basically ever since. I played, I think, half a year for leg, and I think I won the first gold game with them. And that's it. That's all my guilds. Some guests here and there, but mostly team.
All right, so if you say you only play with team, what was the point when team actually went into top GvG? Because the moment I researched team, I came up with like 4 or 5 guilds because you changed the name over the years, and I'm pretty sure the first team only won poop trim. So what was the time when you really went into playoffs, into the top GvG back in the day, the silver trim era?
Should be about 2009. We played at Strikers 1 team first. I don't know if that's not on Tolkano.
No,
It's only on
it's on
Galway
all.
Memorial.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's on the old one.
yeah. And it should be like mid or end of 2009 when we played in Gallia Mystery Team and Mathclub Party Crew. That's when we had our most success, I would say.
All right, all right.
But we never won a gold cap or anything. We were ranked 1 in the ladder for quite some time, but we never won anything.
Well, you're not the only one who went to a bazillion of silver trims until they eventually could reach gold. But yeah, um, to go further into the questions, what class? I mean, it's quite obvious, but what class are you most known for?
Prot Monk. I basically 99% of the time I play Prot Monk.
All right, so
Even at the start, I always started as Prot and stayed that way.
I usually ask the guest, what is your last play bar? But we all know the fucking meta bars. How we switch it up for you. Um, what was the prod bar you enjoyed the most throughout your GvG career?
That's Shield of Deflection I enjoyed the most. I think that's from 2007, maybe 2008, as Monk Ellie with the Glyph and the old Aegis, and Shield of Deflection as Elite. That was really fun.
All right.
But you can't play that anymore, obviously.
Yeah. How do you think prop monk changed from back then to now? Like I'm pretty sure prodding for the majority is pretty much the same. You want to mitigate as much damage as possible, but considering the elites, the old Aegis, do you feel the game has run into a certain corner which you can't get out of because you're forced to take all those skills? Or do you think prodding now is in some form or another better than back then?
I would say it's more involved than back then. With the old Aegis, you just had so much defense and you had a blinding surge maybe as a midliner or a water alley, and you had the red weapons permanently in the main team. And not as many entry moves and shutdown, because again, playing against two Mesmers is really difficult sometimes, and so much entry move.
Do you,
That practically changed, yeah.
do you enjoy it more now compared to back then, or would you prefer more defense on the team?
I always liked having one defensive midliner in the team, just my preference. But again, in this currently you cannot, because the slot is usually running a flag, right?
Yeah,
So you
obviously.
can't have that. But I would like to have more defensive builds again, like a midliner, a ritualist, for example, or a blinding bitch or something else.
All right, all right.
That would be nice again. Not an arrow mage, of course, but sometimes would be nice.
I mean, I get you. I have the same feeling when playing. Before we get into further questions, how about we let Kisaki, I hope I'm not butchering your name,
That's
introduce
perfectly fine.
himself. All right, then. Then go ahead. What is your most known in-game name? Where did your GvG history start?
The most known in-game name is actually pretty tough, I think, because the most known in-game name should be IMRLI, the one I'm using right now as a support monk. Because from back then, my GvG history is not too extensive. I started with Eldrith in the original team, the very first one, back in 2008, I think. The good
Yes.
old poop trim contender. But I quit fairly quickly afterwards. I was only playing a few months, I think. And then I stayed around, but I wasn't really playing actively GvG. Was still playing Guild Wars, but as for the GvG return, it just happened with Reforged in December. And then, yeah, this is where we are right now, pretty much half a year later. But from the old days, there's not much to talk about. It's just been a poop trim contender in the very first start, and maybe networking a bit, because we stayed in contact throughout all of these years and now got back together, kind of. And I joined all of the players that joined along the way after I left.
Yeah, but I personally wouldn't sell it short. Like, even though you won poop trim back in the day, if we look at Guild Wars Memoria, for poop trim, you had to be somewhere between a rank 17 to I think 32, which is already more guilds than we have currently playing the MAT. So if you consider the fact that we had roughly 60 guilds back then, and you somehow had to make top 30 pretty much, that's a whole different story compared to now.
Yeah.
It was still an effort to get there, even though it is not silver trim. We know this, but it's still an effort, and I wouldn't sell it short. But since you've been talking about the past, which role did you start off, and is it still the same you're playing now in team?
Yes and no. So I started as a runner, and now I swapped to support monk, which we thought was the same role, but it isn't really, right? Support monk is much more comprehensive than runner ever was, I think. And now that the mid lane started running the flag way more, you just shifted to a triple backline in a sense. So back then it was definitely a ritualist because it was just the best runner. But it was so different to how it is right now.
Yeah, it personally for me it feels like at least kinder, and this is where we get to Eldritch's mentioning of a midline defense. The third monk kind of feels like it is the old B search basically. Because you're still running on something that could potentially do damage back then. Now you're definitely running on something that does damage, and you still keep defense in main. It just shifted from being a hybrid to a full monk, I suppose. That's how all people or older people who are returning can see it. When you say you played Rit in the past and now playing monk, is the way of playing it different, or does it feel hard for you? Because back then you obviously just had to support and then consider running again, and now you're basically constantly in main. The times you run a flag as a monk is so low, like you could basically say one flag per game, if at all.
Yeah. I think it is so much different actually. I tend to think, without wanting to sell anyone else's efforts short, I actually think the support monk is the most let's say the most versatile job in everyone's team, because you need to prepare for a lot of scenarios, right? When it comes down to splitting, like there's so many little things you need to be aware of, like so many matchups you need to be aware of as well. In splits, like just take the typical 4-4 split worms start. You need to be super aware of like little things in there, otherwise you're just dead. Like there's sometimes nothing you can do if you get caught. Or like playing against double ally split or any other splits, even if you are just trying to delay a Mess-Minded Dervish. I feel like you need to be aware of so many specific matchups and situations compared to just being a main team monk. Obviously, without actually trying to sell them short because they have to do great work. But if you compare this to how Ritualist was back then, you just put a Resilient on any of the NPCs in the Lord Room and then spammed Wielderspoon, and that's it. I think it's much more
Involved.
more involved in all of the gameplay, and I feel like you just need to be way more aware before your main job was always you bring the flag to the flag stand.
Yeah.
I tend to think back then the most annoying part for me was avoid pressing the Cowlie Ash so you don't drop your flag. That was like when I started, that was like my biggest goal. Just don't mess it up. Don't accidentally press the wrong button and drop your flag.
Yeah, so
So
as done before with Eldrith and usually with my guests, I would say pick a bar you play the most, which you can explain. Um, and I think almost everyone, runs the same support monk bar nowadays.
yeah.
Slight deviations here and there, like some people run rough over patient and shield guardian sometimes over spirit bond depending on the map and stuff. I think that much is clear, and it doesn't help going through it again. I think a better question here would be, since you returned as a Rit previously to a monk now, how was the change for you? Did you have to adapt to something specific? Because a Rit obviously plays, in my opinion, more like a pro. You want to pre-weapon people and shit, and then look for a party healing while still keeping flag running in mind. Well, the support monk isn't really about flagging. Yes, you have to know it for your team and shit, but it's not really what you focused on. So, did you have to adapt to your monk in a specific way? Did something help you in that case?
I think it was a pretty big change. Not only for me, but the whole guild, because we returned and we just wanted to play like we used to. So we started actually playing this monk as a flagger, like we used with the Rit back then. But we quickly realized that it's no good, that the team just keeps dropping and you need to adapt to what everyone else is doing. So I think that was the biggest change and the biggest challenge as well for me. playing the monk bar itself, I think is fine. But one thing that I noticed back then, you were able to fake your skills much more than you are right now. I feel like these days you can't really you can't waste too much mana faking your spells to like fake out the mesmer interrupts. Because simply you would go and you already go under the pressure that is right now, right? I feel like this is the biggest change to back then, and also the biggest challenge.
All right. I usually ask people who are already winning gold trims and shit. And since you mentioned Eldred only won the gold trim outside of team, questions like who's overrated, who's underrated. But I think it would be interesting, or far more interesting, for other people to know. It's kind of a question for both of you. Back in the day, was there a team you have looked up to? You have looked at their games, or specifically observed their games to get better? And is there such a team nowadays? Is there a team you're looking up for to learn from?
Yes. You go ahead.
Okay, fine. Back then it was definitely Raw. I mean, Raw was the team back then when we started. They were so much better than everyone. At least that was the general opinion. And they played such a fun gameplay as well. They always like try to play around the defensive mid laner, which is really cool. And they still managed to have clean spikes with all of their builds. So they really were super aware of the damage they could deal. Right now, I think when I try to compare stats or review some games, it's always against Fist. XXX is up there for sure, but I feel like Fist is more consistent. And they've been around for so long, and it's really fun to also play against them, scrim against them, even though we don't do that too often. But you learn so much from just playing against them, watching their games, also checking Torcano, just checking the stats, what they do, what position of them of their team does. So I would compare Fist to Raw back then for sure.
All right. And what about you, Edred? Is it the same?
I would say nowadays Fist, of course, and gamer problems as well. But back then I disagree about Raw. I always liked what's going on sub. I think this was one of my first observed matches from them. And we want cookies now. I don't know if anyone remembers them, because they were a German guild back then. And they actually helped us a lot to improve in team. We had 1 or 2 guests sometimes from them, and they helped us.
It's quite an interesting take. If we're looking at, I mean, I get that you like the team that helped you a lot, which is now. But now, back in the day, weren't they known for playing Spike most of the time? I think they even won a gold trim against Ross Smurf trim or something with a Spike build, which is similar
I
to
think
what
they mostly played, yeah.
which is similar to
Yes.
what Kisaki says with Ra, because Ra usually played super defensive spikes. But then again, you mentioned sub, which is like the complete opposite. Usually try and pressure and or split.
I remember having they played mostly balanced in my head. I might be wrong, but I think they mostly played the balanced or some variation of that.
All right.
What's going on? Sub, I mean.
Yeah, yeah. I just remember their MAT builds, and that's usually some very offensive metagame stuff compared to Raw. But it's interesting that you have these different guilds and their playstyles as, let's potentially say, people you look up for or look up to compared to nowadays. It's mostly Fist, and Fist is, in my opinion, if we compare it to old guilds, more like sub than Raw, because they are usually playing the most offensive stuff they can. And looking at those guilds you just mentioned, where would you put team? Like, are you more on the let's play fully offensive, or let's play less offensive, more defensive, and more spike orientated type of bullets as your guild?
Well, I think that depends on the flux as well, but mostly I would say we are more of a spike guild, I would say. But it really depends, right? Back in the day, we played dual ranger the most, I think, and hex overbuilds. But the dual ranger meta was our strongest, I think, and that was really spike heavy back then with the pupil ranger. And I would say that's still true today, that we try to play more spikes than anything else.
Makes sense. It was a spike meta game, especially 2009, which was like, I think from start to end mostly spike, except for like the occasional lingering curse stuff. When you came back as a team, was there something specific you had to adapt to aside from, okay, we run flags on damage? More about build choices. Did you try to go your old way aside from, as mentioned before, the flag running? Did you have to adapt to the current meta game in a way that did not feel good to you in the first place? Because I know a lot of people that came back and were like, I can't even play Axe Warrior because of Mindfrag. That feels like so bad.
We actually came back and we struggled a lot in the first 2 months, I think, with
Maybe
finding our own
3 months, I think.
maybe
yeah.
3 even.
Yeah.
Like finding our own identity, like playstyle. I think it was pretty hard for us because in everyone's mind we still had this old meta, and also our lineup sometimes feels a bit limited in terms of the classes we can play because we are pretty set on what everyone likes, and we also want to have fun together, right? So we try to make it work with what we're good at in terms of classes. But overall, I think we struggled a lot adapting to this high DPS playstyle that we have right now. I think the fluxes surely play a role, sometimes in our favor, sometimes a bit less. And we also, it took some time to fully adapt to those, to fully embrace the meta per month, let's say, or meta per flux. So it was quite a struggle, and I feel like it still is a bit of a struggle for us, as it probably is for a lot of returning players.
Yeah, I would suppose so. When we're looking at the current meta game, is there a certain playstyle, a certain type of build that you prefer? Because I know there are so many deviations of builds out there depending on the flux. Sometimes you have Elementless, sometimes you have AOD out there. Nowadays you have the double mesmer, MOI sin, or just straight up triple melee with the Lisser. You have Spirit Way. Is there one build that suits your team very well that you mostly enjoy? And if so, why is that?
I would say let's actually we played the Necro Balanced for I think 1 or 2 months even, and it worked quite well. And it fit with our playstyle very well. So 1 Ranger, 1 Mesmer, and the Blood Necro. But this month it didn't really work because of the flux. Everyone had the +2 life regen, for example, so pressure builds weren't that strong. And we tried to play the 3 melee with the Lizard Dervish. I think maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe, and it just didn't work for us. I'm not quite sure why, but we just can't play it. So we basically most of the time now we play two frontliners, 2 mesmers, and then switch the midliner for what we need. Maybe an MOI sin, maybe an Ellie, maybe a Necro, for example.
Alright, so you still kept the Ompet running, or tried to keep it running in some sort of way. Looking at the builds and stuff, have you actually looked at Guild Wars Memorial? What builds used to be played in the Flux, or did you just go off by what is on observe, what people run? Did you actually do research, or just like, yeah, let's look at what people just play at the day we're online?
This one was actually quite easy. Let's say we just copied Fist's dual Paragon build. We liked it quite a lot, and we died against we played against them like 2 or 3 times maybe, and we just died after 2 minutes. And we decided, okay, that's our build. Let's play that, and that's it.
Yeah, but in general, we don't really check Memorial too much for like old fluxes. We just
True, yeah.
check what. Yeah, we basically just check what's going to be played in the tournaments, and then we go from there. So it probably takes a week for us to adapt and then prepare for the mat.
That's quite an interesting take, because I know plenty of people who basically love either the old Memorial, the Redeemer one, or the new one, which is Tolcano, and go about what used to be played, why it used to be played, how did these guilds win with, let's say, Singast over Triple Melee, and try to understand the game before they load in, and you're just like, yeah, we look at Fist and they win, so we take it. Do you think changing that, considering the upcoming fluxes do not always promote a playstyle that you generally like, could help the team improve?
Probably yes. Like think for ourselves, of course. But when you play a Flux for the first time, because back then when we played the Banner Fluxes, right? And usually when a new Flux comes out, we discuss a bit of our builds. Maybe we can change something, but we usually run the builds from last month's that worked, and then go from there, right? So if the Flux really is as impactful as it was in May, then we change our builds completely, like no elites and stuff. But I think next month might be, not that impactful. Maybe I'm probably wrong, but maybe.
Yeah, I heard about next month flux quite a lot. People were very hopeful that due to the increased activity, because for example, your guild is back and others like the bouncers and more people play than the last few years, that the variety of builds would change. But looking at Guild Wars history, which is basically Tolkana now, most people will still play triple melee with the double mesmer, or a mesmer version of Singast, basically just putting Gast on the mesmer because you get increased casting time and lower cost, if I'm not mistaken. So it's kind of fucked up, because if we're looking at overall, a lot of builds are or a lot of fluxes favoring mostly Mesmer and Elementalist. Not always, but quite so. Um, do you think the flux overall is a good thing, considering you basically played back then without the flux?
I think yes. I think there should be more of them. Because I think there's 2 months in the year that there's no Flux, right? Maybe create something new for them.
I think it's 3 with like a shitty flux.
There's
Like,
3?
yeah,
Okay,
I think
okay.
you have 1 month where it's like no flux at all. It's like Odin's Razor or some stupid shit called like this. And then you
Yeah.
have the party gifting and the minion apocalypse, which is all basically changing no skill at all.
Yeah, true. I think Bounty said it in the first podcast. He liked the Victory or Death mechanic back in the days. And
Yeah.
that would be a nice flux for 1 month at least. Because that would change the metagame completely, I think. That would be really nice to have that back.
See, that's something I didn't even take into consideration since you named 2008. Did teams start before or after VOD? Because I think the change was June, July, or something, or was it August? I think it was August 2008 when VOD was abolished after the MIT.
I think we played in the transition. like right in the middle of that. A few months before that update, we started playing, I think. And I remember we had Splinter Weapon on the Ritualist Runner. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I still remember that.
Yeah,
We
that was
definitely
fun.
had VOD. Yeah.
Did you enjoy VD more
Oh, it
than
was
Lord
fun.
Damage?
I think it was great from a ritualist perspective, right?
Obviously.
I think it was just a huge mess, and it was kind of a fun mess. But you could also abuse it and just play for the end, right? So that kind of made some of the matches really boring.
Yeah, now people would just run 2 or 3 dervishes, maybe 2 defensive characters, and just abuse the system, right?
Yeah.
Just nuke all the NPCs.
Yeah, I would say, considering that I used to GvG back in VOD times 2, probably not as decent as other people like Bounty and stuff. My general take is new system, same shit. You just try to abuse it in a different way, which is very decently shown by the Fist against XXX match of last MAT, where that Flux Dervish just sat on the Lord for like 10+ minutes and just kept doing a lot of damage while the main team just tried to survive, which kind of feels like an all VOD tactic. You defend the base with a monk and try to get NPCs down to get the better VOD, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's true.
How was your take on the dervishes? Like, what year did you start? What year did you stop playing? Did you stop playing before the triple dervish meta, or did you retire in that time?
For me personally, I think I stopped playing in 2012, a few months after the Gold Cape with Lag. And there were some variations of the 3 dervishes running around, like 3 wounding strikes, for example, and more of as a pressure and a condition overbuild. But I never saw the current dervishes run around back then, I think. Which and they're much stronger, right? I think there was a balance update as well. They buffed some skills, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But the first
yeah, go ahead.
But the first dervish we played with were the Melandros dervish, I think with a teleport. So I'm not sure how it works now, but he was immune to conditions back then. Might be right like
the
this
very
now.
old one. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
awful.
he was immune to conditions and 200 HP, and I think 30 armor against elemental as well. And that was pretty strong back then. And the teleport didn't have aftercast, right? That was the first dervish we played, pretty sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So for everyone listening and not knowing how Melandri got changed, when it came out in, I think Nightfall was added in at the end of 2006 or something, it had 200+ HP and was immune to conditions. Then they changed it to 150 HP until they nerfed it in, I think 2007 again, or was it 2008? Down to just 100 HP and immune to conditions. The plus elementalist armor just got buffed at the dervish update in like 2011 or something.
Okay.
But it was still crazy considering the main defense or midline defense back then was B search to for like a year straight. I think for halfway through 2007 to halfway through 2008, B search was like the main defense, and you were just immune to that shit. Was pretty awesome as a frontliner, to be fair.
Yep.
If you could get through all of the extra blocking shit. Comparing this to dervishes now spam a lot of shit that did not exist for the dervish back then. Like, I think with the dervish update, it started with Earth Prayers AoBs that spammed AoE bleeding, AoE cracked, were immune to knockdown due to fleeting stability. Yeah. And that changed and transitioned to, I think, the first Lizard dervishes before they eventually came to Wind Prayers, which is the current dervish now. I think the current dervish bar now only has that signet on top of it that wasn't used back in the day. At least not as often as now, because it got extremely buffed in one of the two reforged buffs, or skill patches. And that's another thing, which I wanted to ask. Since you came back in this time where skill patches are happening now again, and fingers crossed it's hopefully happening more often, did any of those changes affect your gameplay or planning of gameplay?
I think I would say yes. Because we check most of them. And also some of the skills when we came back were super new for us, right? Because we didn't play for so long. But having the balance patches on top of it is actually great. It helps us theory crafting a bit. For a while, we always tried to make hexes work. I think the PNH update didn't really help. But it always is a great point of theory crafting and discussion for sure. And it also gives a lot of motivation to see that we get balance patches again. Because if the meta would stay like this, I think it would get boring quite a bit. So we always have a few smaller changes, even though the overall meta still favors Mesmers way too much. Which makes it a bit, I don't know, a bit annoying at times. Maybe more so for a monk perspective, right?
Yeah, I would suppose so.
Yeah. But also having the fluxes in mind, I think some of the changes might be even better at a later point in time, depending on the flux we have. But that one is pretty. I think it's pretty tricky to judge for us right now because we just came back, and I think we don't really think too much about future fluxes quite yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Since you are playing the monk now compared to Rit, as a runner, how do you feel about the double mesmer? Are you feeling like you're getting a more sort of hate and more focus as a monk now? Like, are you targeted far more compared to back then, or is it sort of like it's a different form but roughly the same?
I mean, you definitely will get focused way more, right? Because you're also more in the main team. On paper, I think back then Mesmers played so differently. It was mostly just shutdown. You had shame, you had diversion. You still
Power block.
yeah, we had power block,
Completely
right? We didn't
different.
even have e-search. We had power block, so it was way more actual shutdown. Right now, I think it happened through the big Mesmer update after everyone of us quit, where they got buffed into oblivion with all of the non-elemental damage, it's true damage. Mind Track is pretty insane right now. I think the Shatter update is mental. Shatter is so good now compared to what it used to be.
Then Mesmers didn't have damage except Shatter. That's it. 100 damage and that's it.
Yeah. And then as a support monk specifically, you're one of the two monks that if you get focused as a monk, it will be the support monk and the healer. Because prots, like spamming or like sitting on a prot doesn't really make sense too much. Even less so in this month's flux because they have even more mana rack. And I think with a better ping, healing burst is pretty easy to get out from a Mesmer perspective now. So generally, I think you get focused quite a lot as a support monk. But if I were a ritualist in the main team, it would be even worse because you don't have any below 1 second cast time spells. Right?
Yeah.
Everything is a second. So a ritualist would be way worse.
Believe me, when I started playing more actively in 2017, which was the time before people picked Mindrak, and Mindrak used to be almost the same. Like, it was super strong already in 2008, but the metagame dictated it was not good to bring it because all the forms of defense you had to take out. It was far better to use stuff like power block, as you mentioned, instead of going for damage. But when I returned in 2017, people were not really onto Mindfrag, and I tried to play the Rit without all the Mesmer hate. It was already super annoying to play it against all the rangers that were meant to run through your entire team, because they all of a sudden had 2 stances, which wasn't a thing back in the day. And they just ran through, and you had to get your 10 energy skirts through that ranger with 2 interrupts sitting in your face. And now it's even harder with Mesmers not having to sit directly next to you, having sometimes 3 interrupts, better energy management, and they would just shit on you. So yeah, I get your point that Rit is definitely doomed, even though, in my personal opinion, if we just look at build compositions, maybe it's just my feeling, but I've always felt like 3 monks is never 3 monks. It's more like 2.5 monks, because from a support monk's perspective, most of your skills are already on the other 2 monks, and the chance of overlapping them, especially under high pressure situations, will happen so often. You may call them out, but you still overlap shit. Well, that stuff never happened with Rit. It was always extra defense on top.
Yeah.
Um,
Back then, you also only played one Guardian, I think. You played Prot Spirit on the healer as well, instead of that. So you only had one enchantment per monk, right? I mean, one Prot each. You know what I mean? You didn't have 2 Guardians, or even 3 Guardians, or 2 Patients. You only had one skill, and that's it. You couldn't overcast. You know what I mean? You
yeah.
never went out each other's way. That's what I mean.
Um, since we went off topic far long, I usually ask people, and we kind of have to get back to this. What are their most favorite and most hated classes? How about we go through this really quickly, and then we go back at the classes you play. But let's start with, what is your favorite class, and what is your most hated classes?
Well, for me, favorite, obviously Monk, right? But second favorite, I would say Paragon, weirdly enough.
Paragon.
But yeah, I just like the concept, right? I don't know. It kind of spoke to me at Nightfall release. And the early parapressure builds, mostly played in HA, but nevertheless, it was just fun. Like, everyone had 150 armor, you had defense anthem, that was like the old ages back then, 50% block for the whole team. It was just fun. You just never died. It was just fun. I don't know. I like that. But yeah.
All right. And what is your
Uh,
most hated class? Which class do you like the least?
Well, to play against, I would say Mesmo, of course. Because
And
against Ranger interrupts, I like to play against them. It's rare nowadays, but I like to play against Ranger because it's a lot of predicting going on, right? And if he's standing beside you, the chances are high that he wants to interrupt you, right? But with a Mesmer and maximum range and stuff, it's hard sometimes, right? And to
if
play,
yeah, if to
yeah,
play. Yeah, I mean, I know you just play Monk, but if you had to play something else in GvG, what would your least
to
favorite
play
class be?
Necromancer, I think. No matter what game, I don't like Necromancers. I don't know. It's just the whole play style is I don't know. It's not for me, right?
All right. Then let's quickly go through, what is your best class? I would suppose it's Monk, because you only play Monk, right?
Yeah, let's hope so. It's Monk, yeah.
And
But yeah.
and what is your worst class at?
Mesmer, I guess. I think I have maybe 1 hour playtime as a Mesmer, probably. I don't even have a PvE Mesmer or something, anything. I don't think I ever played it at all, I think.
All right.
I
And what
think most of my playtime, like 95% of my playtime is on Monk, still.
Yeah, see, the only in-game name I would know about you was like War Angel. I was like,
Yeah.
I've never seen that dude on another class, but sometimes you do not recognize people because you never heard about them playing something else, and then they suddenly play something else, and you're not knowing
That's
this
true.
is the
Yeah.
person. What about you, Kisaki? What is your best class at?
I think the best one should be the monk. I think I'm fairly good at it. I mean, simply because I played it so much, and that it will always be backline choices for me. I played World of Warcraft as well, and it's always been backline, so I'm pretty consistent with that one. But the ritualist would be a close second. And while it might not be my best, I think it would be my favorite in that sense.
All right.
I just like exactly what you said earlier about it. Basically, you never double up on skills. You never use a guardian twice because you always have something else you can use. It's just pretty fun.
Yeah, it just felt different. What is your worst class at, and what class do you like the least?
I would say anything that is frontline I'm pretty bad at. But I would probably put warrior on top because I think playing a really good warrior is pretty tough, and I would be pretty bad at it. And the one I want to or like to play the least, I think it would be assassin. I think assassins are so boring. I would hate playing one.
That's interesting. I think assassin has not been mentioned yet on the stream.
Better the assassin,
Same
right?
for Paragon to be liked by Daniel. So I know a lot of people who just outright hate the class, and if they had the chance, they would just remove it. But Sin, not so much. Yeah, at least yet.
It might be a bit of Singast hate as well. Just making me say
yeah.
this.
Yeah, and mark of insecurity.
Oh yeah. That one is bad.
See, marker for insecurity. This is another take. Since you're playing prot, Daniel, and I think most people who came back play mostly LS, if I'm not wrong, because you just landed in that LS meta for prots, especially with the double mess. Did you consider running either PNH or the new buffed divert hexes against MOI sins?
I actually run PNH quite often, actually. On Worms this month, I think I played it every match. Usually we check against who we're playing, right, on Volcano. And if there's a slight chance they play MOI, I play PNH. Because if you don't have PNH against MOI in the main team, you just die. Most of the time, I think. Against good people, at least.
So do you guys, if you take PNH, do you guys double down and play Purge Signal on the Fuse on top of it? Or do you go back on Cure on the Fuse?
No, we usually never change the healer's bar. He has always Q Hex, I think. Eric, I think he played it once or twice when I didn't have PNH, but we wouldn't double up on it. I think that's overkill. PNH is enough. And Divert Hexes, I would like to play it, but with a 1 second cast time, and if they play triple melee, for example, you can't use your elite, right?
Yeah.
The PNH is manageable at least. But I would like to run it in a different meta, maybe.
Yeah, because I was having the discussion with a monk player the other day, and we just looked at the numbers, not thinking about Mesmer in the first place, because Mesmer will ultimately destroy most of the skills. If it were just about Mesmer, you wouldn't even run HP because you can't get it through most of the time if the Mesmer really runs to you. But if we really look just at the numbers, Divertaxis feels so good. And I played it the other day, and it's just amazing against MRI. You heal like for over 200 if he gets all 3 hexes up on the person. It's just so good. But yeah,
if you know you're playing, sorry.
But then again, if you know you're gonna face 2 mesmers with it, because most of the MRI sins are being played with 2 mesmers, it just feels so bad.
Yeah, if you get it, you cast it once, and then they see you have it, and you will never cast it again, probably. I mean, you can fake, right? But that defeats the purpose, right? Because I could run PNH, don't have to fake and just remove the MOI, right? So yeah.
Let's get another interesting question. Did you guys change your UI in any kind of shape, your interface? Did you make the compass bigger? Did you change hotkeys, skill members, skills, and whatnot?
Yeah, hotkeys I changed. Of course, I changed them for also every skill is on a hotkey, right? And the only thing I changed in the UI, I think I made my energy and life bar a bit bigger and the compass a bit bigger. That's it, I think. But my hotkey setup is horrible. Nobody else could play it like that. But I move with WASD, and I noticed most people nowadays just click. But I don't think I can swap now after so much time.
All right.
For me, it actually, I think the one big change I did was putting the weapon sets on my mouse. Because when I started, I was still pressing like F1 to F4, and it's just too slow. But besides that, I think there's no big change. I still want to do a change, maybe like getting the buff bar a bit more visible, rather
True.
into the center.
Yeah, I made that bigger as well. Yeah, true.
Yeah, I think the buff bar is pretty important, especially if you run if you are in a lot of split scenarios. Being more aware of that is super beneficial. But besides that, I think it's mostly what I used to run all the time.
That's kind of interesting that you guys, as well as the last guests I had on the other two podcasts, not so much touched their interface. While I know that people in the old age, especially people that played in Raw, I think it was Woa on Castrod's old stream, explained how he changed all his shit. I was like redesigning the entire interface. Like they compressed the skill bar at the bottom and then stacked everything on it and had on top of it the party bar, and you only had to look at one specific corner of your screen, and you saw all the shit, and then the rest was just to look at the map and positioning and stuff. It's kind of interesting that a lot of people did not go so in deep with changing the interface. I might be wrong, and future guests may have it, but is there a specific reason why you guys did not change too much about it? Do you like the default design for most of it?
I think, like, besides me liking the default design, it is also better to, like, having multiple corners of the screen you need to check also helps me having a better overview of what's going on. And, like, especially playing Monk, and also when I played a bit of midline since I returned, I feel like having a good grasp of what is going on the screen without checking only the health bars is super beneficial.
True.
Just centering everything in one corner, I think it's a bit of a dangerous rabbit hole. You might just focus too much on that one. Like, there's your party bars and your skills and all of the effects. So you might not check the screen too much, and I think that's super bad.
I get it. It leads to potential tunnel visioning. If we look at your histories, Kizaki coming from Red to Monk and War Angel just playing Prod for almost the entire time. Is there something specific you had to improve on when coming back because it was played so differently? Is a specific aspect about your role?
For the prot, I would say nothing much has changed, right? I mean, the skills are mostly the same. You play Shield Guardian instead of Hex Remove most of the time. And that's kind of it, right? And a restore condition that the elite changed, but it's basically the same, right? It still does the same thing. But other than that, I think it's well. I have to say, prot defense changed for me the playstyle, right? Back then you played balanced stance, or way back you played the glyph from the alley. But practice defense, you actually have to coordinate a lot with the team, and we still struggle with that. And it's one of the best prot skills you have, ironically.
Yeah, because you can't take it down basically unless you start moving.
Yeah.
What about you, Kizaki? Was there something specific you had to, aside from transitioning from Rid to Monk, to learn and adjust specifically for the metagame? Because I remember playing Monk back in the day, mostly for split matchups on certain maps like Worms or Frozen and such. But Monk was still different to what it is now.
Yeah, I think besides learning how to play the monk itself, which I think that one is fairly easy, you notice mostly on split maps. You need to learn all of the lord rooms again, to be fair. Like especially, where was it? I think it was on Weeping, where we played against double alley split and we used to just send me back. And I thought I could just hide in the lord room, but on that map I couldn't. It might not have been Weeping, maybe it was Worms actually, but one of the lord rooms, I just got demolished in there and it was so frustrating. So I think for support monk specifically, it is a lot of small things you need to learn. And also the positioning in the main team, or how you react to maybe you or the opponent's team pushing on the flags to delay them. I think that's a lot of little things you actually need to learn. A lot of matchups you need to learn. I briefly talked about it earlier. I think that's probably the biggest challenge so far, and it still is ongoing.
Yeah, if you had to speak, or if some returning player or a new player from, let's say, PvE came up to you and asked for advice on your specific role, is there something very specific you would tell them to look out for first before looking at other things, like learning something specific and then moving up from that, because it's very important?
I think for the support monk, positioning. I think check your positioning. That's probably the most important one for me. And that one combined with don't focus too much on the health bars. Focus on the screen and what's going on.
That's actually a good answer. Something I would have given a PvE
You
player.
have prots, and prots are supposed to be on there before the damage happens, and you will never be able to do that by just checking the health bars. That is a very unique thing to Guild Wars in that sense.
Also, like to add like something basic for a lot of us, but having the equipment ready, right, and your correct weapon sets. Because if you're casting on your 40/40 heal set Guardian permanently, you're gonna get shut down.
Yeah.
It's very basic, right? But for beginners, I think that's one of the most important things to consider: having the equipment and the setup that you need, right?
I mean, it's quite funny when you talk about setup, because you basically joined the game after that super stupid broken 60/60 or 60/50, depending on what you could get, stuff got nerfed. Because there was a time.
No, we played 2 months or 3 months, I think,
Did you?
with the sets. Yeah.
They nerfed it in January, I think.
Yeah, or maybe February. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I felt like they nerfed it earlier. But that's some stupid ass shit. And if you would tell this now to someone who came back, like you guys, it was probably something insane, like 60/60. What the fuck is 60/60?
Yeah, it was insane. Yeah. We were quite shocked that existed.
Do you feel better now since it's gone? Because most of your time you probably not play it, because back in the day it wasn't a thing. Even though the bug probably existed then.
Well, I don't think it was a new bug, right? I think it actually potentially existed back then, but we didn't know about it, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So do you
And
feel better since it's gone? Because Mesmer's is still strong. Or
yes, yes,
would you like to have it still in the game?
no, I feel better about it. Like, if it's not intended, then it shouldn't exist, right? But other than that, I mean, it didn't change that much. I think it was for allies, it was the most, it had the most impact, I think. And for anybody else, not so much, I think.
Yeah.
I might be wrong though, because I didn't use one. I just still played on my PvE monk. I didn't have the set, and I still think that the staff for the prot monk is better with the longer enchantments. I think.
In split situations, I think it had to be removed. Like, especially on how oppressive these new ally bars are right now in the split. Mind Burn and Mind Shock, or
Yeah, it's crazy.
even Lightning Surge. If you had that constantly on 60/60, super hard to deal with. And they are already pretty hard to deal with, right? With all of their, like, let's say, unlimited pressure for at least a minute ongoing, and they can swap with every skill to a new target, and you would just go.
And back then, that was quite a challenge to adapt as well, because when we started, a lot of matches were dual ally split, right? And in our minds back then, you split it with 2 fire allies with Mind Blast, and a Ridge Runner could hold that back then. And we were still in that mindset, and we just sent our 8 back against the 2 allies, and you just die. Not instantly, of course, but you just die.
Or
Yeah.
sometimes instantly.
Yeah. Depending on how they time the knockdowns and stuff and how they get you, yes, you just die. And back then you sent the red back and held 1v2 and just won in the main team, and that's it.
Yeah, the game changed a lot. So,
Yeah.
since we went through your individual, I would say tips for the class, since you returned as an entire guild, not solo, is there something as a guild you would give out as a tip for new people, or let's say potentially even PvE players that want to come into GvG, that is really good, that helped you stay playing and potentially improve? Is there something or some advice you would give them?
For me, I think having fun and most importantly, having fun with the people you play with is the most important thing. If you're constantly arguing and having discussions or like doubting each other, you will never make it, right? And that's the most important thing. I think it's hard to find 8 people, 8 like-minded people, but I think that's really important.
Kissaki, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I fully agree. I think there's not much to add, really.
When you guys
Because
can, yeah, go ahead.
if your individual skill is lacking, for example, you have 1 or 2 weaker players, you can build each other up. If you're already friends, if you're building a connection with the people you play with, it's just easier. That it's a relaxing environment, you know. It's hard to describe, but it's really important.
Yeah, I get what you say, and I'm pretty sure it was touched on in one of the previous podcast episodes that synergy within the guild, like I think Bounty called is somewhere having a leader and having the correct vibe really means a lot and helps you go a long way. When you guys came back, did you just play as a guild? Did you try to join the scrims? I think there were some EU scrims, and I think Barbie is hosting most of the American scrims. Did you join this, or did you just stay as a guild and basically kept playing only there?
I think most of us, if not all of us, just play with team. We sometimes guest, mostly with the bouncers, because they're also all German like us, I think. And I never joined the scrims on the Discord. I know they're going on, but I usually, if I play Guild Wars, I play with the guild, right?
Yeah, I think it's the same for me. I'm not super aware of like specific Discords and some scrim teams going on. And
Yeah, we
I
scrim
think,
guilds between the AT matches sometimes, but the
Yeah.
official scrims we never joined. I think no.
Is
I
there
think it's
is
also.
yeah, go
No,
ahead.
sorry.
Go.
Okay. I think it's also most beneficial to scrim within your set team. Like, obviously, you can learn your role a bit better if you just play more. But I'm not sure how much that helps for backlines sometimes. At least if you're already fairly convinced that you know how to play your role, then it mostly comes down to how you execute some of the decisions in the match. Even against splits. And I think that is what you mostly learn within your own guild, within your own set team, rather than joining like maybe randomly mixed teams. But I can see the benefit of those because you also learn how other guilds deal with certain things, or even get some advice, or like hear some call outs that you maybe not use in your own team, and that could help.
Yeah. About scrims, because I've been asked about this so often now. When you got into GvG, since you're avoiding scrims nowadays, which is for a good reason, I think playing with your team mostly makes totally sense. I would get that, especially when your team is fairly active. Not everyone has such an active team. But when you have it, it makes totally sense to play in there. But when you started, and this is the point I wanted to make, scrims did not exist the way they are now. How did you transition into GvG overall? Because I think nowadays it's sort of harder than back then because the community is smaller. Was there a period of time where you said like, all right, we met up in random arenas and started forming a team, or did you meet in HA? Did you just play in a PvE guild and decide to, oh, let's try out GvG? How is your path into GvG overall?
For me, it was through a website called War Tower. It was a German Guild Wars website back then, and you could search for teams, right, or for guilds. And I think the leader back then from team was looking for players, and so I joined, and that's basically it. So I never met someone and in Venom Arena, for example, or in HA, for example. I just went on the website, looked for GvG guilds, and joined one. And we went good, right? I mean, there was maybe top 500, something like this.
Yeah.
But through consistent playing together, I think we grew as a team together, and then got good. Let's get good together back then, and that's it. But it's hard now. I understand because the community is so small.
I think for me it was actually through HA. I think I was playing with the leader of team back then, HA, and then he asked me if I wanted to join. And then he got more people from the German website. At least this is how I remember it, but it's been a while.
Yeah,
But
I
it
was
felt really easy.
Yeah.
It felt really easy back then to find a guild, even as a beginner, because I had no experience. I think I was ranked 3 or 4 in HA, and that was quite an achievement back then, by the way. And yeah, it just worked. It worked differently back then.
Yeah.
That makes total sense because the amount of players were a lot more compared to now. If you had to start over again, let's say you would come to the game now and you were not together as a guild, do you think you would have gotten into the game as easily as you did back in the day? Because I'm pretty sure War Tower doesn't exist anymore. Might
No,
be
it's
wrong,
that.
'cause-
It's that, sadly, yes. But I mean, the Discords exist, right? But I
Yeah.
think it's really hard as a beginner to find a guild, or let's say find 8 players, and it's really hard for them to stay together. I think if you start with 8 beginners and you play, let's say, 10 matches and lose all of them, at least one of them is going to lose interest and say, that's not for me, I give up. I think. Or maybe not 10 matches. Let's say you lose 50 games in a row, let's say, at the start. And people will get demoralized pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah,
But
I think your win rate when you came back isn't that great either, right? You're hovering around 50%,
it's still
I would
not.
say.
Yeah, it's still not great, to be honest.
But you still
Yeah.
keep going, right?
Yeah, because the game is still fun, and there's no other game like it out there, and that's why we still play. That's why we came back mostly.
Yeah.
But I think it's also, if I might add, I think it's also because we know each other from back then, and there's no drama.
Yeah, and we still play other games together as well. Not all of us, like 2 or 3 people play this game, 4 people play this game, for example. But we stayed mostly in touch. Yes.
All right. I think we can go into this later. But first of all, when you stopped, was it the same core team that you play with now, or did you have to substitute other players? Let's say, from your old core team, only let's say 6 people came back and played now, and you had to find 2 new ones. Or did your entire team stop and come back?
Oh, we just had 2 new guys come in basically, but we know them from back then as well. From Too Tired to Play On. That's Eric and Malte. And that's it. And I still had Eric on Steam, for example, and just asked him, and he wanted to play with us. And Malte I found through the QQ Discord. Because I was looking for a midliner for I think December MAT, and he since then he's playing with us. That's Seragon is his in-game name.
Yeah. So when you mentioned QQ Discord now, which is basically sort of in a similar way War Tower now, did you have any requirements when looking for someone, or did you just look for a vibe that you just can hang out with the person and be cool with?
When we came back, we didn't have any requirements except, if possible, be German. That's it. Just to make it easier, right? Because 7 Germans and 1, let's say, English speaker. I mean, it works, right? But it's just easier if everyone speaks the same language, for example. That was basically the only requirement.
So you just going with how or how to make the gameplay as easy as possible and enjoyable rather than having title X, Y, Z.
Yes. Because I don't think titles matter anymore, right? And capes also don't.
Yeah, see, this is another point I wanted to ask. Since you guys came back in a time where you get no cape when winning at all, like back in the day, you had the poop trim, which I talked about last episode, and the silver trims that were gone first, and now the gold trim is gone as well, and you have to earn reward points to buy it. Does that did this in some sort of manner diminish your motivation to play, or are you guys like, yeah, it's not cool that we don't get one, but fuck it, we play the game for the game?
Yes, I would say so. But I think also I would like to say it's quite sad that you don't get any reward for playing the MAT, except get the tournament points, right? I think they should add more capes, or this maybe unique trims, for example, that you can only get in the MAT. But new capes would be nice.
And also, I think sometimes the tournament point distribution seems a bit low. It doesn't seem rewarding, especially if you don't even make top 16. But even if you're outside of top 8, it feels like super unrewarding.
Yeah, see,
I think we got
What did we get? Like
100 last
no,
month. Yeah.
Was it
400 maybe,
500 actually?
or 500,
Yeah,
not
yeah. See,
much. Yeah.
this is something I talked about with Fade and Loof the other episode in. You get flat points for participation from start to end. I think it's like 15 points or something. Something super low. Then you get double the amount of points for a win compared to an AT. I think it's like 3 or 4, and you get 6 or 8 in the MAT. And then you get a few points extra or something for your overall placement. But the majority of points is rewarded to the so-called winners, which is like the top 20%, I think, from the guilds participating. So when you compare it to back then, I think there used to be very far back MATs with 100 guilds. Then you had the top 20 guilds that would get an extra percentage of reward points. But if you compare it now with such a low amount of guilds, sometimes you have like, I don't know, 25 guilds in there, and 5 guilds are just random guilds that forfeit the first round. So if you look at the just 20 guilds and you're looking at the 20%, you have to be really far up to earn reward points, which I think in combination with not getting a trim at all feels so
Lackluster.
punishing for guilds,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Because for HA, for example, you get much more rewards, and you can play that every day to open the
And it's
chest.
also easy.
Yeah, it's
Like
and it's
there's
easy.
mostly bots. You just farm rewards and then you play actual pretty tough content and play like this one big tournament every month, and you don't even finish that badly. Like you're top 16. Let's say you finish. You make it into the playoffs and then you face first round. Obviously you lose, as most of the guilds do, and then it's over for you and you barely get anything. It feels a bit tough, but I wouldn't say it's something that would make me not want to play GvG
Yeah,
anymore,
yeah, we
because
don't
it's
play for the
still
rewards. Yeah.
it's still just the fun of the game mode. And as Eldrith said earlier, it's so unique, and I've never found it in any other game that way, and this is why I enjoy it so much. But still, more rewards would be nice, and I think it would also motivate more guilds to actually play, and we would have much more competitive, like a much more competitive scene and more enjoyable mats even, or ATs, because some of the ATs recently, they barely get going. We have 3 quick rounds. It's super boring.
Yeah.
They could add station quests maybe for ATs and MATs. It would be nice. On the day of the MAT, for example, you go to the NPC and get a big quest just to play, maybe.
That would be actually cool. I haven't thought about this one. I mean, I got a lot of ideas, and I've been scrolling to the 2 weeks Discord for ideas and stuff, and just looking into what people suggest to them. Most of it is PvE stuff or changing the flux time and stuff. But the idea with the Zaishin quest for ATs is very interesting.
Yeah, that could work. The framework exists, so should be quite easy to add, I think.
Yeah.
But the rewards need to be balanced, right? But the idea could work.
Yeah, I mean, everything that gets new people or returning people more into playing is always good, in my opinion, because the activity levels can still rise. If we're looking at how many guilds played last MAT, and looking at how many players that means overall played the MAT, we're at roughly 180 people, which is comparatively many people when you look at other games. But comparing this to other games also means, depending on the game, you're looking at teams of 4 to 5 people. Guild Wars needs 8. So it is quite the difference. So every increase in activity is great for us. Another thing I wanted to ask about your guild overall is when you came back, and perhaps even now, aside from playing ATs and MATs and occasionally guesting for other people, do you guys practice stuff in 2v2s, 3v3s because the metagame changed so much, or do you prefer to just play it out in ATs?
We mostly play just the ATs as 8. But sometimes we had 1v1s or 2v1s, for instance, just to test new builds. The Shadow-Faced Assassin, for example, with the bug. You know, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this, but we practiced it. It didn't work for us, but
We're
we
pretty
practiced it.
sure everyone
Yeah,
tried it
yeah,
at some point. So
yeah. I know. I hope they nerf it. But we practiced that, for example, or just new bars in general, like the standard MOI sin. And at the start, we practiced the necromancer, the blood necromancer, just to see to test the limits right against NPCs. But other than that, we mostly just play as 8.
do you guys theory craft a lot? Because I know back in the day, a lot of people loved just sitting there talking about skills, talking about what could we do as guild, and then put some shit together and be like, yeah, let's test it really quick. Or are you more like, let's just hit the game, play the AT. If we come up with a great skill, let's try it. But you spent more time playing than thinking about the game, or is it the other way around?
Well, I still like to build builds, but we usually don't test. We can't test all of them. I have the app open now, the Pond. I don't know if you're familiar with that. You can team build the whole build, and I have like 150 builds in there, right? We can't test all of them, but yes, if someone has an idea, and it makes sense and everyone agrees, we usually play it. Yes.
All right. So since I'm through with all my Guild Wars questions, you mentioned you would play other. Oh wait, I've got one more Guild Wars question, and then we go to this. If you were a dev for a day, and you could do whatever the fuck you want with Guild Wars, you could delete classes, you could delete skills, you could change up an entire class to whatever the fuck you want. You could delete maps, make new maps, and whatnot, whatever you came to your mind. If you could change one thing and you would get away with it, what would it be?
Ooh, that's
Well,
tricky.
yeah.
I think I would probably adjust a lot of the ritualist builds just for the love of the class.
So you will make rituals viable again. I get it.
Yeah, that would be my main goal.
Okay.
For me,
yeah. What
well,
about you?
if I could only change one thing, it would probably be that how much damage Mess must do. And if I could change two things, I would like to nerf Gust Sins to the ground. I don't know how exactly, but I don't ever want to play against Sin Gust again, right? That's what I would change.
Yeah, it's quite annoying, but I get that. So since we're done with the Guild Wars questions, you guys mentioned you stay in contact outside of Guild Wars and do other things. Let's say Guild Wars would be done tomorrow. The game would be taken offline. It's no longer viable. Which game would you guys play together?
Guild Wars 2. No.
Oh,
We actually used to play that quite a lot. But currently we're playing Hunt Showdown, quite niche, I think. It's an extraction shooter. And Helldivers 2. And Subnautica. But that's not comparable to Guild Wars, right? It's mostly PV. But yeah, we'll be fine. But there would be something missing.
yeah, makes sense. Since I'm through with all my stuff, is there something you wanna say, put out there? This is your time to say whatever crap you want to anyone. If you have something to say before we are done with the
I
show.
For sure, for sure.
Oh,
I think
Oh no.
I think judging from the previous podcasts, guilds need to stop overrating. Yeah, they're actually overrating us. I feel like we're being a bit overrated simply because we used to play back then. But from my perspective, it often feels like we're not as good as people think.
Yeah, I was quite surprised that in the last two podcasts we were underrated as an underrated guild. But I don't think that's true.
well,
But yeah.
I think my at least my personal view on this is, you guys played back in a time when there were like 2 or 3 times as many guilds in the MAT, and still made it to top 16 a good fair amount of times, and people really consider this a lot harder than it is now because you almost automatically get top 16 now. Like you have to win what, 2, maybe 3 games to get top 16. Back then, when you had like the not just 6 but sometimes 7 round Swiss round, you had to win like at least 4, most of the time like
True.
5
That's
or
true.
6 games in order to get playoffs. So it was a lot harder, which is why I think people tend to underrate you, because you used to be a fairly decent guild back then, and coming back and still showing up and be at a good level is something that people quite highly value, considering there are a lot of people who stayed and played the game and they're not as good, to put it nicely.
Right, I can see that, yes. Okay, true.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think some of the better guilds also noticed that we grew quite a bit. And also, if we scrim them, things like some months were actually a bit closer than they used to be.
Yeah, we
especially
still don't
against the
win, but
Fizz.
it's closer at least.
Yeah, yeah, it's getting a bit closer. But I think it's also quite normal for us to see more of the bad things that are happening. So we are more aware than other guilds probably.
All
Yeah.
right, all right. One last thing I want to ask is, I talked about this with Fate and Loof. Do you guys, since Tolkana exists and people love the shit out of it with analyzing how many skills are being used and stuff, do you guys tend to use it quite often? Do you analyze your games in either going through Observe, talking about it, looking at Tolkano, maybe doing both at the same time, and try to analyze your games?
Or I think some of us, yes. Not always collectively, but after some of the ATs, we stay together in Discord, watch the replays, observe our matches again. And personally, I always try to use Turkana quite a bit.
And we use it to predict builds of other guilds quite often as well.
Yeah, I try to use it a bit more to understand what other classes are doing. Like, especially for the Mesmers, I try to compare what other guilds are doing with the same build compared to us. I think that sometimes help, especially on Mesmers. You can see distinctive playstyles on how often they use their skills. And then I try to give some feedback going from there.
All right. I think I've got everything covered. Unless you have something else to quickly say and get off your chest, I think we can wrap it up now.
I think
No,
it's fine from my side.
Yeah, same for me.
All right.
Besides, of course, thank you so much for setting this up. Much appreciated to get a bit of a platform to speak up about our past and challenges and everything going on.
You're welcome, and I hope this hits the right people, and some people who are either considering coming back or are playing PvE or whatnot see any sort of inspiration in what you said, and figure they come join us in GvG. Because we
Yeah,
love
hopefully.
increasing activity. Come join us.
Yeah, certainly.
I think Reforged did increase the player base quite a lot, right? In December, I think.
Yeah, compared to the last few years, I'm pretty certain the activity increased, but it feels like it's going down again slightly, mostly
we noticed it
because
too. Yeah.
the two patches that happened were not really great. And my personal opinion on this is, especially with this month's flux, most of the changes do not really evolve into the gameplay because so many changes were to elite skills, and you now have a flux that favors non-elites, and then next month you have a flux that obviously favors attribute lines that go between 8 and 11. And I'm pretty sure most people would just look at what used to be played last year at this time. So the flux, to some degree, even though it changes the metagame in a way, stops the proper metagame to evolve because it suppresses what could come. And I feel like this diminishes the fact that patches happen and people are just bored of playing the same shit over and over again. But since there's no one willing to test a lot of crazy shit, it's not changing. Or at least this is what I see from the outside.
Yeah, that's true. But in the last update, I think there are a few elites that got changed that might be really good now, that we only figure out a few weeks later because of the flux. For example, Weakness. I think Weakness is really good. And I think Book played a Weakness Necro against us in the MAT, and that worked quite well. And there are quite a few other skills that got changed that might be really strong. Shadow Shroud, for example, I'm just looking at the changes now.
You see, a couple of those skills were stronger in the past. Like I remember Bounty and Cry. I'm pretty sure it was Cry. Win an MAT with weaker knees back in the day. It was almost as good as it is now. I'm not quite sure what changed much, but they nerfed it after this, and it's got buffed again. So I think it's almost the same. Shadow Shroud, as you mentioned, is great. Shadow Prison on paper with the 15 recharge looks great, but then you think about the aftercast and you're like, maybe not so much.
Not
right?
so great. Yeah.
The Atom Prism is great for Elementalist, but Elementalist doesn't have room with all the Mesmers. Same with Recurring Insecurity. It's a great cover hex that keeps on going if you just keep one hex on the person, but there's no room for it due to all the Mesmers, the great hex removal that is or potentially around.
We actually tried to build a hex over build with it, but it doesn't work. Yeah.
I've seen Healer's Covenant, but it fits. Even though it's not a bad build in generally speaking, it just doesn't feel good enough to replace the Healer's Boon, in my opinion. We have a couple of other changes like Air of Enchantment, which used to be played really far back in the day, which is not being played now, even though it could be a new smite build. But then again, you have Word of Censure, which does so much more damage, while would you play a purely defensive elite. And this basically goes for almost all elites, because you can't really play it in the current state unless you build a team build basically around this, which is possible. I've seen the what was it, ghostly weapon, Rit Smitus or something, and I've seen a Weapon of Fury kind of build somewhere, and Skullcrack here and there, but it's not really taken towards the metagame, and I feel like the flux is to some degree stopping it.
Yes, I agree.
Anyways, if you don't have anything more to add, I thank you for coming on. I hope people.
Yeah, thank you for having us again.
People enjoyed it, and
let's hope.
I wish you good luck in the coming 18. I'm pretty sure you're gonna play it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Well then, good luck, and thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, guys. This was today's episode of Weekend Weapon of Choice mostly focused on the returning guild team. Hopefully, some people tune in either yet now live or later on YouTube, get something from it. Hopefully, come join us in the GvG community, play AT with us or against us. That's cool too. As mentioned at the start of the stream, next week's episode will be later, roughly 3 to 4 hours later starting time. Because I couldn't change my goddamn shift. I didn't get the chance to. And it will hopefully, it's not confirmed yet, but hopefully feature American guests. So we talk about the American side of Guild Wars GvG, not just the Europeans. All of this will be announced on the Discord a few days, hopefully prior to the live show. If you want to join us on the Weekend Weapon of Choice podcast, it's down on my stream in the About You section. You could click the Discord banner, come join us. If you have any questions or suggestions for possible guests or topics or whatnot, come leave it on the Discord. We can talk about it. Thank you guys for joining, tuning in. See you next week.